This is a checkpoint. Now here's what's interesting. We all have guns, right? I don't have a gun, but my driver has a gun, my security guy has a gun, and they're looking for guns. And so they're going to search us. So now they start to, and then when I say, look, I'm an American, they kind of go, oh, well, then just go.
Yeah. Nah, y'all keep going.
It's a free country.
Huh? Where y'all from?
I'm from LA. I'm CBS News.
CBS?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There is a school of thought that says we should have given the citizens of Baghdad 48 hours to get out of Dodge and flatten the place. Then the war would be already over, and we could have done that in 2 days.
One of the things that we don't want to do is to destroy the infrastructure of Iraq, because in a few days we're going to own that country.
Target Iraq. Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Are we going to fix that technical problem?
Tick-tock, it's time for a shock. Are you bored? It's time to get awed.
ABC,
NBC, CBS,
CNN,
Fox News, breaking news, faking news, the media war. It's time to get sore.
Wreak havoc and unleash the dogs of war. And there they start moving into Iraq.
We got rockets coming in on us. Tom, we're under attack right now.
PFC Jessica Lynch, who was being held.
The battle for Basra is still raging along this
The
road.
invasion of Iraq has invaded my brain. It's like I'm under attack. War is all I see. I dream of an endless desert.
That this is the beginning of the shock and awe.
Dissolving into bombs falling, into tanks rolling, into soldiers shooting, into people dying, into reporters reporting, if that's what they're really doing.
This is the end. Beautiful friend.
We have just this second crossed over the border into Iraq.
Talk about embedding. Even my bed offers no escape from the 24-hour news cycle, spin cycle, Iraqi freedom cycle. The Pentagon has invaded my living room. Their generals have taken over my TV set. Is it news or propaganda? Or in this age of media mergers, has the media merged with the military? You don't have to go into the jungle anymore to find the horror. It has come home. I feel like I'm living through my own media apocalypse, under fire on the polluted river of TV news. This is media war without end. I'm a media critic. My job to dissect the news. There were 2 wars going on in Iraq. One fought with soldiers, bombs, shock and awe. The other was fought alongside it with cameras, satellites, and armies of journalists. They were fighting a media war. That was the one I covered. Throughout the war, I was self-embedded at this computer, writing about media coverage worldwide for the MediaChannel.org website. Every day I read newspapers and magazines, sifted through websites, listened to the radio, and studied the TV coverage.
Right in front of us, an amazing sight, just like out of an action movie, but this is real.
The war went on for 720 hours. I watched as much as I could stand, and was not the only critical journalist.
So was this journalism, or was this coverage? There is a grand difference between journalism and coverage. And getting access does not mean you're getting the story. It just means you're getting one more arm or leg of the story. And that's what we got.
Live coverage of a war is, I mean, to describe that as live journalism is, I think, an oxymoron. I think it's bad journalism.
I thought the entire American media, print as well as audio and video, was seduced by this run-up to the war. There was an envelopment in the American flag, a patriotic sweep.
Say what you like about Rupert Murdoch's Fox network, its strange intimacy with God and the US administration, but it takes real flair to put this on national television.
Using the facilities when there aren't any facilities. How you going to the bathroom, buddy?
So the reporter called a soldier over.
You want to demonstrate for us how you sit on that shovel? You want me to do it? Go ahead. There you go. There you go. Isn't that something?
In the second Back of the Book segment today, a book called The More You Watch, The Less You Know. With us is the author of The More You Know, Danny Schechter, who has had many TV news jobs, including being a producer for 2020.
Years ago, I became a network refugee, challenging the superficiality of mainstream news, especially in its treatment of war. Even when covering wars in Vietnam and Cambodia, I also critiqued the coverage. I did the same when I worked at CNN and ABC News, and then with colleagues on Global Vision's TV series about South Africa that told unreported stories. Ditto for human rights coverage of Bosnia and Saddam's terrible crimes and abuses. Warring with the reporting of war has been an obsession for years. I lambasted media failures during all the hoopla around the first Gulf War.
The majority is saying thumbs up, you know, and I like that.
So here I go again.
UPI cameraman Ed Heller, pinned down with the GIs, took these dramatic scenes while the dead and dying covered the floor, seats.
It was this history of covering wars that led me to look at the relationship between the media and the military. To understand why people rally around the flag the way they do, you have to consider the information that shapes their opinions and impressions. How wars are covered or covered up is key.
I can say without reservation that these magnificent young Americans are as fine as any fighting men our nation has ever sent into battle.
The Pentagon's efforts to control press coverage were a response to the loss of the war in Vietnam. Many of the military to this day believe that the media coverage was responsible for America's defeat, not the armed forces or the policy. In that era, reporters were far more aggressive in exposing war crimes and duplicity. Peter Arnett was one of them.
In Vietnam, the reporters did not get on the team. We challenged generals, governments, we demanded their accountability, challenged their findings. Vietnam is seen by the right wing as a war in which the American media sold out to the communist side.
Well, you should be a pain in the ass. I mean, any reporter in a time like Vietnam, you ought to be a pain in the ass because that's when it counts.
Generally, it's my belief that Richard Nixon was much more of a national security threat to the United States than any reporter I know.
After Vietnam, the Pentagon limited media access to its wars while improving outreach to journalists with training exercises like this.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm really busy. I need to attend to these people. Excuse me, please.
Remember, everything you say is on the record. Camera's off, doesn't matter. It's on the record. You say it, it can be used.
Man, basically all the soldiers here are heroes in one way or another.
Wars may destroy people and countries, but they can be profitable to cover. CNN won the 1991 Gulf War in the sense that its coverage propelled a struggling cable news operation known in the industry as the Chicken Noodle Network into a top global news brand. Revenues followed as ratings soared.
Against Iraqi forces in Kuwait. Iraq claims the attack is failing.
And so did patriotic fervor. Even as media objectivity eroded, that old truism, truth is the first casualty in war, was never more true.
Against Iraqi forces in Kuwait.
Journalists were denied access to most of the 1991 Gulf War, writes CNN's Christiane Amanpour.
Some of the killing fields.
Behind our backs, behind the backs of the field reporters, field producers, and crews on the ground, our bosses made a deal with the establishment to create pools, what I call ball and chain, handcuffed, managed news reporting. The result, we later learned the smart bombs used then were not so smart. Only 1 out of 5 hit targets. Most U.S. casualties were caused by friendly fire.
I've covered enough wars to be able, in a position to say this, that we have never, including me, have never shown the viewer what it's really like, and how horrible war is. And partly you can't show it because the camera can't capture it, but even at a certain level the camera may capture it and we won't show it. There are certain kinds of close-ups that we won't show. There are certain blood spatters, dead children that we don't show people, partly because it violates sort of long-standing practice. Don't put gore on television.
The coverage of the Gulf Wars lacked more than gore. Context and background were missing, like the role the U.S. played in putting Saddam Hussein in power and arming him for years. America's war on Iraq did not end with the end of that war. Washington initiated and the UN imposed sanctions, which, coupled with the cruelty of Saddam's regime, reportedly led to 1 million children dying and the spread of new diseases. A mysterious Gulf War syndrome struck veterans. The U.S. and Britain imposed no-fly zones, using them as a cover for warlike bombing raids years before the 2003 invasion. None of these stories received the full coverage they deserved. And then came 9/11. The Bush administration used the attack as a pretext to put in place secret plans to invade Iraq drawn up before 9/11. The media was mobilized behind the war on terror. In post-9/11 America, a patriotic correctness swept through the news business. TV anchors put flags in their lapels. I wrote a book showing how the coverage advanced the government's plan to respond militarily. Some stories explaining why they hate us gave way to this.
It all became very personal at 9/11. I was in command of my battalion at the time. I mean, I was in the training meeting when that happened. The unspeakable acts against pillars of our strength being, hit by aircraft. You can imagine what it was like. It all became, very, very personal.
Much of the coverage fueled demands for retaliation. There was often more debate in the streets than on TV.
The same hatred that killed so many people.
Many networks said they didn't want to get ahead of public opinion or be baited as soft on terrorism.
They don't love me, and I don't love them, okay? Okay?
This confrontation at Ground Zero in New York shows what happened when a peace activist called for global understanding.
What about us? Do you care about every human being here?
It's September 11th. You're at Ground Zero.
If they do something to us, that we're not going to do nothing back, but we're not going to do nothing back.
They didn't do anything. Iraq did not do shit to America. So you're saying it's okay to kill innocent people?
Listen, if it's for a better good, let's do it. Yeah, I volunteered. You know why?
To keep your ass free. To keep your hippie ass free. He puts his life on the line.
Don't forget, the American media is based in New York City. Every reporter in New York City saw the World Trade Towers collapse. They took it personally. There was a sense of revenge, of fear, and that was reflected in the coverage of the Afghanistan war and the war on terrorism.
We may be wrong about some of the things we're passing along to
CBS's Dan Rather, September 22, 2001. I am willing to give the president and the military the benefit of any doubt.
As we moved into Iraq, a more preemptive strike, the media maintained this sort of romance, you might say, with government.
But the fact that they allowed the Bush administration to manipulate the truth so grossly and so nakedly in the run-up to the war made the war possible.
The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons.
All the while, Washington insisted Iraq had to be disarmed, that it had proof that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction that threatened the world.
Saddam Hussein recently saw significant quantities of uranium.
The demonization of Saddam Hussein went on for 5 months. During the run-up to the Iraq War, American media outlets, including most TV networks and the New York Times, relayed the administration's spin on the threat posed by Iraq without much question. Without their cheerleading, there could have been no consensus for war. In May 2004, the New York Times acknowledged its pre-war reporting had been deeply flawed. A Times editor called it an institutional problem, indicting editors and reporters who, quote, coddled sources and practiced hit-and-run journalism. He admitted that America's self-styled newspaper of record had not just reported the story, but become part of it. Quote, covering the war was not the Times at its best.
Only now, of course, we're learning so much of the stuff that we simply assumed must be accurate. It wasn't accurate at all.
The ombudsman of the Washington Post later admitted, it's clear now that the press as a whole did not do a very good job in challenging administration claims.
Critical perspectives about alternatives to war, all the kind of efforts and discussion of the peace movement virtually disappeared from the media at that very point where notionally, a society was making up its mind as to whether to go to war or not.
The media monitoring group Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, or FAIR, studied 1,617 on-camera sources between March 20th and April 9th, 2003. They found 71% of all sources were pro-war, only 3% anti-war.
I saw a figure the other day of something like, I forgot the exact figures, but something like there were 800 experts used during the war on all the American broadcast outlets, and only 6 were opposed to the war. Now, that seems a pretty odd state of affairs.
In this period, I was hoping war would be averted. UN deliberations were covered, but dismissively. International opinion was not taken seriously. The media frame became us versus them.
There was a buzz here for many weeks. One journalist told me that buzz is gone. Instead, there's a pall, a feeling of total frustration.
The United Nations wanted to give the arms inspectors time to finish the job, but the Bush administration bypassed the UN, claiming to act in its name by launching a preventive war, unilaterally, as an act of self-defense. Britain and a few other nations joined what was officially branded a coalition of the willing. Critics called it a coalition for the drilling.
The United Nations survived this failure.
The United Nations is more important than ever. We need collective responsibility.
When countries like France called for more UN inspections, they were denounced as cheese-eating surrender monkeys in some media outlets.
And despite the fact that we have no weapons of mass destruction, the U.S. armies have crossed the Atlantic and they are preparing hundreds of thousands of other soldiers.
The United States insisted they were there. What happened to those weapons?
Well, I think it has been destroyed. It has been destroyed by the Iraqi government because they felt at that time that there is no need for it. Anyway, they cannot use it because if they would like to use these chemical weapons, the other side will destroy the whole Iraqi people, the whole Iraqi country. So I think they did realize that, and for this reason they destroyed it. And they destroyed it earlier, 91, 92.
This claim, ridiculed by the media then, is largely accepted now. An exhaustive March 2004 University of Maryland study on the coverage of WMDs found that threat was exaggerated, reported inaccurately, and irresponsibly. After the invasion phase of the war ended, journalists debated their role in fueling a war climate.
The run-up to the war was extremely well covered. The run-up to the war was one side.
Why? That's what we voted on.
Most of the...
On one panel, Harper's Rick MacArthur challenged Time Magazine's Michael Elliott. Afterwards, I spoke with both. Is it the news culture? Is it the lack of critical thinking? Is it economic interests?
Well,
is it all of the
above? It's all those things, but it's mostly owners who don't care about journalism.
I think the American media has done a fabulous job since September the 11th.
Wasn't this a media system that was cheerleading for the war?
I think undoubtedly what you saw in the war was a sharper distinction between the print media and the TV media than I've ever seen before. Or maybe I should have said that in the session just now.
They got to watch what they say. If Michael Elliott gets up there and says, yeah, Time didn't do a very good job covering the war or covering the run-up to the war, he's out of a job. He's going to get in trouble with his bosses. I can say it because I'm a publisher.
In the run-up to war, dissent was marginalized, debate was limited, protests and protesters seen but rarely heard.
More than 1 million demonstrators turned out in London. The march is thought to be the largest ever in Great Britain.
Sadly, the coverage was at its worst in the period when it mattered most. The period bracketed by the worldwide demonstrations on February the 15th and actually going to war was one in which British public opinion turned round from being approximately 60-40 against the war to approximately 60-40 in favour of the war.
Washington Post ombudsman Michael Gettler blasted his own paper for underreporting or poorly displaying coverage of big demonstrations here and abroad.
There was fairly decent coverage of the fact that there was an anti-war movement. What there was not decent coverage was the analysis of what we were trying to say about what was wrong with the war, why we never should have gone to war, why the war needed to end, what was driving the motor force behind the war. That analysis never got into the mainstream media.
No war! No war! No war! No war!
It was freezing in New York during the huge February demonstration.
It's taken George W. Bush to sort of revive the progressive movement in the United States and Western Europe.
How is it? Great to see you. And everybody looked at you like
South Africa's Bishop Tutu was a featured speaker.
What do we say to peace?
The mainstream media sort of ghettoizes this kind of coverage and doesn't allow it to really enter into the mainstream discourse. I think they'll report it, they'll show the crowds as a mass, they might show some sound bites, but they won't really get into like what the significance of this movement is.
At later protests, I spoke with journalists and activists about the coverage we were then being bombarded with.
The purpose of journalism is to question the prevailing wisdom. The journalism we see in this country, for the most part in the mainstream media, does not question anything.
And that scares me to think that here it is, it's a war, people's lives, the whole world is changing, and most of us are just watching it like another entertainment channel.
If we invade Iraq, there's a United Nations estimate that says there will be up to 500,000 people killed or wounded. Do we have the right to do that to a country that's done nothing to us?
Frozen out of the news, activists tried to buy airtime for anti-war commercials like this.
No nation under God has that right. It violates international law. It violates God's law.
Most networks wouldn't run the spots, even for the money. Many activists soured on mainstream news, turning to hundreds of internet sites. They also turned to foreign TV outlets, especially the BBC.
Iraq, Saddam. Iraq, Saddam.
Many young people abandoned the news altogether, preferring satirical newspapers like The Onion and comedy news shows. Many turned to alternative and independent media.
It's up to the media to challenge those in power, not to cozy up to power. So you have this media that's embedded now in the government, in the military, and yet at the same time there's hope because there is a response to that, and that is the independent media movement.
A global news army was put in place before war erupted. On all sides of the conflict, media outlets were spun or controlled by governments. In Baghdad, mainstream journalists say it was tough to get the truth. Sometimes independent reporters were able to do better.
Every foreigner is followed by the secret police, but journalists are watched even closer. And there was an army under Saddam Hussein of government officials whose only job it was to spy on journalists. So you have no way to avoid being under the control of the Iraqi Ministry of Information.
Burnt in their tanks.
They tapped my phone in my office, my hotel room. There was a small camera in my hotel which watched my every movement. I used to have to go into the loo to get changed.
I determined that the best thing was to not get accreditation as a journalist in my visa and to go in as a humanitarian worker.
They are not near Baghdad. Don't believe them. They are nowhere. This is silly.
Iraq's media minders worked for the Minister of Information, Mohammed al-Sahaf, known in the West as Comical Ali for his false claims. Most of his threats of Iraqi resolve were treated as a joke. Later, as resistance emerged, some now seem almost prophetic.
The bribery system was appalling. Some television crews were paying up to $5,000 per visa.
So in the case of Rupert Murdoch, he has, a tremendous number of media outlets, probably the most of any single company or person in the world, operating in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. And one colleague who works in a Murdoch news operation estimated that Rupert Murdoch was giving as much as $500,000 to Saddam Hussein's government during the lead up to the war, just for permission for his news outlets to operate there. And there was a running joke that Rupert Murdoch was the second greatest source of cash for Saddam Hussein, second only to oil smuggling.
There are pockets like Tikrit.
If Iraqis were corrupt, so were some Western media outlets. New York Times correspondent John Burns and others accused Western media companies of competing through corruption, literally buying access for their correspondents and cameras, while not covering human rights abuses and the suffering of the people. CNN later admitted it did not report abuses of its own staff members in order to keep its office open in Iraq.
F-18 streaked in, dropped.
Few of the journalists who covered the war covered the way it was really covered. Independent reporter Robert Young Pelton, author of this best-selling travel book to the world's most dangerous places, had his eye on the media eye.
There was never any sense that we might go to war. It was always like, we're going to attack Saddam Hussein, and here's why. There was very much a script on how this war was handled. There was a kickoff.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours.
And then there was a countdown. You got 48 hours to get out of town. Then it was like everybody tuned in for the opening kickoff. As the war progressed, it was done on a linear scale. We're going from here to there. It was almost like we're running a pass. There were people actually drawing diagrams, generals drawing diagrams on a map that looked just like a football play. We're going to go sneak around here, and we're going to do this, and we're coming up there, and we're doing that.
This sports metaphor offered a simplified narrative, mimicking a familiar TV format. When Pelton was delayed getting into Iraq, his focus became the press.
So I ended up being the only person embedded with journalists during the war in a fancy hotel in Jordan.
Right now there's apparently 4,000 journalists everywhere from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan to Syria to Turkey, all waiting for the war to start. And some of these people have been sitting around for 9 weeks.
They lived in very nice hotels. They were all on expense accounts. They met at the bar every night. They worked 24 hours a day.
The President will address the nation at 10:15.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The level of protection would be minimal, and if I were a news president or a news executive right now, I would be pulling my people out.
When the war had finally begun, the networks began pulling their reporters out of Baghdad. Peter Arnett was in the Iraqi capital with a National Geographic documentary team. He decided to stay.
Covering wars are a dangerous business. You can die, and those companies feel responsible for their people in harm's way. They sometimes order them out.
I think there is something to be said for staying. However, from a news executive standpoint, the risks are enormous.
I sort of have a genetic tick that allows me to go into dangerous areas without too much concern.
The interesting thing is that the American military were trying to intimidate these journalists. They were saying, you know, you're going to be a target and everything. And the journalists were working overtime to say, look, we're here, this is our coordinates, don't fight here. And everybody knew that journalists were at these hotels. That's why they were at these hotels. It was also known that if you're going to have shock and awe, you need somebody to record it. I mean, the one thing that they left out was they needed the media to fight this war. The war was set up to be filmed and recorded by the media. So there was this bizarre symbiotic relationship.
When the awesome bombing of Baghdad began, what was shocking was the way news anchors lovingly described lethal weapons. They became boys with toys.
Should they have used more? Should they, use a Moab, the mother of all bombs, and a few daisy cutters, and, let's not just stop at a couple of cruise missiles.
Yeah, only 40, huh?
I want to see him use that Moab.
Action to begin. CBS's David Martin at the Pentagon is following the planning and has the latest on a possible timeline.
To promote its war, the Pentagon made media management a priority. Their strategy was sophisticated, clever, and almost always covert. Few media outlets exposed it. Most participated willingly for their own political and economic reasons. Pentagon strategy went beyond traditional PR, using marketing strategies and perception management. Administration officials likened their war planning to a product rollout. It was all to guarantee there would be only one storyline in the media and in the minds of Americans, theirs. A Pentagon advisor told me it was intentional. They knew that TV networks prefer storytelling to sloganizing. Their storyline became a master narrative, defining Iraq as the problem and U.S. military intervention as the only solution. Traditionally, propaganda is targeted at the enemy. In this war, it was smoothly infiltrated into the news, aimed at American and global public opinion.
There are known knowns. There are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we now know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we do not know we don't know.
This platform is not a platform for propaganda. This is a platform for truth.
In his war plan, Tommy Franks, the U.S. military commander, described the press, once known as the Fourth Estate, as the Fourth Front. He knew that a supportive media was essential for victory, and he